The Experimental Life, One Man's Joyful Quest to See What Happens, by David Russo. Chapter 1. The Opposite Day Experiment. What if I rewired my routines and did the exact opposite of what felt normal? When I left my job, there was no dramatic exit. No shouting match, no impromptu plane ticket to Thailand. I slipped out the side door of my old life, like someone quietly ducking out of a movie halfway through. Not angry, just done watching. There was no master plan. Just a single spark of curiosity. What would happen if I stopped living out of habit and started living like a human experiment? I didn't know where to begin, so I picked something playful. Something small enough not to scare me, but strange enough to feel like a departure. I gave myself this prompt. For one full day, do the opposite of what you'd normally do. This wasn't about chaos. I wasn't going to dye my hair purple or quit carbs or move into a yurt. The point was to notice how much of my life I'd been sleepwalking through and shake it up, gently. Opposite day, 7 a.m. Normally I'd hit snooze a few times. That morning, I sat up on the first ring like someone had just dared me to. Normally, I'd scroll through my phone before I even opened both eyes. This time, I left it face down in another room. I made a breakfast I don't usually bother with. Wore a shirt that had been gathering dust in my closet. Brushed my teeth with my non-dominant hand, just to short-circuit my muscle memory. It felt clumsy, but oddly electric, like flipping a light switch in my brain. On my walk, I took the slower way. The route I usually avoid because it doesn't optimize time. I passed a flower shop I'd never noticed, a handwritten poem taped to a lamppost, and a man singing to his dog like they were rehearsing for Broadway. All of it had always been there. I'd just been too busy trying to get somewhere. At the coffee shop, I skipped my standard order and asked the barista, "What drink do you love?" He didn't hesitate. Lavender oat milk, latte. Sure, why not? Did I like it? Let's just say it tasted how a scented candle smells. But still no regrets. I made eye contact with strangers. Took the stairs. Agreed to a last-minute invite to a local comedy show that was so bad. It looped back around to being oddly perfect. Throughout the day, whenever I felt the tug of the familiar, the instinct to do what I always do, I paused and asked, "What's the opposite choice here?" Sometimes it meant doing something small, like ordering something unfamiliar. Other times it meant making a different emotional move, saying what I actually thought instead of what sounded agreeable, slowing down instead of speeding past a moment. By the time the day ended, I hadn't reinvented myself. I hadn't cracked some big truth. But something had definitely shifted. I realized that most of what I thought of as my personality was just repetition patterns I never questioned. Routines worn into my days like grooves in a record. Doing the opposite didn't change who I was, but it reminded me that I have a choice, and that felt like waking up. Chapter 2. The 7-Day Lazy Challenge. On the morning of day 1, I rolled out of bed at 10:43 a.m., not with guilt, not with grogginess, with toast crumbs already on my chest from a mid-dream snack. It was the first time in years I hadn't woken up to an alarm or the low-level dread of incoming emails. There was no checklist waiting for me. Just sunlight through the blinds and the strange realization that I could do anything I wanted, or nothing at all. So I did nothing. I moved from bed to couch like a man in slow motion. I watched a documentary about mushrooms. Not for research, just because they looked cool. I laid on the floor and stared at the ceiling like a kid who's just been told recess will last all day. Riley texted around noon. Riley, what experiment are you doing again? Me. Laziness. Riley, so you're not doing anything? Me. Exactly. Riley, is that really an experiment, or just what unemployed people do? Me. Can't it be both? Riley and Toche. By day 3, something started to shift. I wasn't just unproductive, I was unstructured. I ate when I was hungry. I wandered around the neighborhood with no destination. I sat on a park bench for nearly an hour, watching squirrels conduct what I can only assume was a high-stakes nut heist. And I started drawing again. Badly, of course. My sketchpad looked like a child's fever dream. Uneven houses, lopsided cats, a tree that somehow resembled a terrified jellyfish. But I couldn't stop. My hands wanted to make something. Not for money. Not for likes. I hadn't felt that in years. On day 5, I ended up talking to an older man at the coffee shop who saw me sketching and said, "Looks like you're enjoying yourself." I told him I was doing an experiment in laziness. He laughed. Well, don't forget boredom is where the quiet truths start to speak. That one landed harder than expected. By day 7, I realized I hadn't once felt the urge to optimize. I wasn't trying to turn this into content or a side hustle. I didn't journal for future video talks. I just let myself be messy, spontaneous, horizontal, human. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't efficient. But it was real. The experiment ended not with a bang, but with a yawn and a quiet knowing. There is no creativity without space. There is no fuel without rest. I'd been so addicted to output, I forgot how input works. Sometimes you have to lie down long enough to hear your own thoughts again. Chapter 3. Say yes to everything. It started with a podcast. Some chipper self-help guy with a suspiciously perfect laugh said, "If you want to change your life, say yes to everything for 72 hours. Invitations, opportunities, even the weird stuff. Especially the weird stuff." I paused the episode and stared at the ceiling. Yes, to everything? Could I do that? The lazy challenge had taught me to slow down. This felt like the opposite, an invitation to speed up, to step into the current and see where it pulled me. I wasn't entirely sold. But then again, what was the point of an experimental life if I only tried things I was comfortable with? I didn't have to wait long. At 6:17 p.m., I got a text from Josh, a guy I barely knew from my old office job. JOSH. "Hey, random question. Want to come to my friend's birthday party tonight? It's rooftop karaoke. Bring weird socks?" My first instinct. Absolutely not. My experiment brain. You know the rule, me? I'm in. I'll bring socks with tacos on them. Josh, that's the spirit. By 8 p.m., I was on a rooftop in a part of the city I'd never been to, holding a plastic cup of punch and singing a very off-key version of Total Eclipse of the Heart, to a group of strangers who cheered like I was Beyoncé. I ended the night talking to a woman named Mia, who taught pottery and believed every human should learn to make their own cup at least once in their life. It's primal, she said. Hands shaping something that will hold your morning. Honestly, she wasn't wrong. Day 2 escalated quickly. At a cafe, the barista complimented my shoes. I said, thanks. Then, she said, "Hey, our salsa class is short a lead. Want to fill in?" My mouth opened to say no, but I caught myself. "Yes," I said. "I would love to embarrass myself in front of your dance instructor." I spent the next hour tripping over my own feet and laughing with strangers, one of whom, a guy named Lewis, invited me to a midnight poetry reading in a laundromat. That's not a typo, a real laundromat. Apparently, it was a monthly thing. "Yes," I said. "Obviously." That night, I listened to a teenager perform a poem called "I Fold My Shirts, the Way My Father Left While Dryers Hummed Behind Him." It was honest and raw, and better than anything I'd ever heard in a lecture hall. I walked home at 2 a.m., buzzing with aliveness like I'd wandered into the back alley of the universe and found magic hiding there. On the final day, I said yes to helping a stranger move a couch, taking a free sample from a skincare kiosk, and getting a 10-minute unsolicited facial. Signing up for an open mic next week. My hands still shake thinking about it. Here's what I learned. When you say yes to life, it says yes back in the strangest, most wonderful ways. Chapter 4. Where the weird thing. It was highlighter yellow. Loud. Blinding. Banana pelan fire yellow. A full suit, jacket, pants, even a matching vest I didn't ask for. I found it in a second-hand shop tucked between 2 tuxedos and thought, this looks like it used to belong to a circus magician who quit mid-performance. Naturally, I bought it immediately. Day 1, I walked into a coffee shop, and 3 people turned to stare, not subtly. It looked like an emergency exit sign had come to life. The barista raised an eyebrow. "Is it a theme party?" "Nope," I said. "Just Tuesday." She grinned. Respect. It was fascinating. Everywhere I went, I became visible. People approached me, some out of curiosity, some with caution, a few with compliments. A kid at the park pointed at me like I was Big Bird's younger brother. "Mom, look, that man's a highlighter." On day 2, a woman at the train station asked if I was in a play. "No," I said. "Just experimenting." "With what?" "Confidence, I guess. And fabric." We ended up talking for 15 minutes. Her name was Anya. She used to be a costume designer but got out of it because, she said, it felt easier to shrink than stand out. That line stuck with me. Most of us are trained to blend in where safe colors, say safe things, don't draw too much attention. But something weird was happening. The louder my outfit, the more people saw me, and the more I saw me. By day 3, I stopped feeling like a walking joke and started feeling like myself. Or at least a version of myself that hadn't been let out in a while. The yellow suit had become a kind of armor, not to hide in, but to show up in. I was walking taller, making eye contact, smiling first. On day 4, I got a free sandwich from a food truck guy who said, "Anyone brave enough to wear that in public deserves extra cheese." And by day 5, I wasn't in a rush to take it off. Sat on a bench downtown that evening, notebook in hand, and wrote. Wearing something loud made me feel like I had permission to be loud, not annoying loud. It's just unapologetic. We talk so much about authenticity, but maybe sometimes we need to dress our way into it. It wasn't about the suit. It was about permission to be bold, to be playful, to stop muting myself for comfort's sake. The yellow suit is now in my closet, next to a boring row of grayscale hoodies. I'm not saying I'll wear it every day, but I'm also not saying I won't. Chapter 5. The Phaleon. It started with a bad drawing of a frog. Like, really bad. The kind of bad that makes you question if the artist has ever seen a frog. I'd been doodling in a cafe when a little girl leaned over, looked at my sketchpad, and said, with the brutal honesty only children possess, "Why does it have 5 legs?" "He's evolving," I replied. He looked sad. Honestly. Same. But instead of feeling embarrassed, I laughed. Hard. It was freeing. I hadn't meant to draw a good frog. I was just playing around. No pressure. No expectations. And it hit me. Failure only feels bad when you're trying to succeed. So I opened my notebook and scribbled. Experiment. The Phaleon. 1 week. 7 things I'm guaranteed to be terrible at. Goal. Fail fast. Fail joyfully. Fail big. Day 1. Drawing. I bought a sketchbook and went to a park to draw strangers. One guy looked like a melted candle. A woman with a ponytail somehow ended up with 3 noses. When every time I showed someone my terrible portrait of them, they laughed, not meanly, but with delight. "You made me look like a haunted librarian," one man said. "Art is subjective," I replied. Day 2. Stand-up comedy open mic. Worst idea yet. I told 5 minutes of awkward stories into a sticky microphone at a dive bar with 8 people and 1 very loud blender. I got 2 laughs, 1 accidental I tripped on my way to the stage, 1 genuine when I talked about the frog. It was humiliating, exhilarating, and somehow addicting. Day 3. Cooking without a recipe. Let's just say my intuitive stir-fry ended in smoke, a ruined pan, with a fire alarm that wouldn't shut up for 10 straight minutes. Riley called mid-chaos. "Are you cooking or exercising demons?" "Both. You're gonna die doing one of your weird experiments." Isn't I'll die curious. Other failures that week included singing karaoke in a language I don't speak Japanese. Sorry, Tokyo. Trying to skateboard down a very gentle hill I fell before I pushed off. Writing a poem with my non-dominant hand. Why? Doing a cartwheel should have stretched first. And yet, by day 7, I felt lighter than I had in months. There was something oddly thrilling about being bad at things on purpose. It turned down the volume of perfectionism. It made space for play. No judgment, no expectations, just joyful disaster. The truth is, we're all bad at something. We're just trained to hide those parts. But when you stop caring about being impressive, you start being real. Chapter 6. Reverse routine. The idea came to me while brushing my teeth before bed, and suddenly wondering why I always brushed my teeth after dinner, before bed, and never before lunch or during sunsets. It was such a small, oddly specific ritual. One of 1,000 things I did on autopilot. And I thought, what if I flipped the script? What if I did everything out of order, just to see what I noticed? Day 1. I started by eating dinner for breakfast. Spaghetti and garlic bread at 8:30 a.m. is an unholy, but strangely powerful thing. I followed it with a slow walk through the city in the opposite direction of my usual route. Turns out, your neighborhood looks completely different when you're going backwards. Shops you never noticed. Murals on buildings you'd passed 100 times but never looked up to see. I walked past a bakery that smelled like childhood and into a thrift store I hadn't noticed before. Bought a ridiculous hat shaped like a duck. No regrets. Day 2. I stayed up all night and slept during the day. Not because I was working, just because I could. I wandered the streets at 2 a.m., listening to jazz through one earbud, watching windows flicker like silent stage plays. There's something beautiful about being awake when the rest of the world isn't. You feel like a secret? I texted Riley at 3:07 a.m. Me. I think I just befriended a raccoon. Riley. What experiment are you doing now? Me. Reverse routine. I'm eating cereal in the bathtub and thinking about the moon. Riley. You need supervision. She might have been right. By day 4, I stopped using GPS. Took unfamiliar roads. Got lost on purpose. wandered into neighborhoods with different languages on the signs, different rhythms in the air. It felt like travel without leaving the city. I started noticing things, how sunlight hit windows at different angles in the morning versus evening. How a street I'd always found boring suddenly had character when walked in reverse. Even my own apartment felt unfamiliar and fresh when I swapped the furniture around and slept on the couch for a night. On day 6, I brushed my teeth before dinner. Just to see how it felt. It felt weird. And kind of great. Minty spaghetti. Highly underrated. By the end of the week, I realized routines are helpful until they become invisible. We build them to create ease, but then we forget to look around while living inside them. Sometimes you have to interrupt your own rhythm just to hear the music again. Chapter 7. Be a beginner again. There's a particular flavor of fear that only shows up when adults willingly step into something they're bad at. Especially when it seems like everyone else has a head start, like, say, playing the violin. I didn't sign up out of some buried dream to become a virtuoso. I picked it because it intimidated me. It looked intricate, foreign, way outside my wheelhouse. So I enrolled in a beginner violin course at the community center. Adults only, which was a relief, until I realized that didn't make it any less nerve-wracking. I walked in carrying a borrowed violin from my neighbor Eugene in the quiet dread of knowing I had no idea what I was doing. The night before my first class, Riley called, "You do realize you're going to sound like someone stepping on a goose, right?" "Course." "That's kind of the goal. You're brave." "No, just bad at avoiding things that scare me." Honestly, same difference. Day 1, a chilly room with a ring of folding chairs and a handful of adults looking like they'd all rather be anywhere else. Everyone smiled too much. No one spoke first. Then Ms. Lane walked in, calm, centered, and carrying the quiet authority of someone who's heard every wrong note and lived to teach again. Introductions were stiff. Our bows were stiffer. Every part of the instrument felt alien in my hands. My posture was wrong. My grip, clumsy. My first few notes sounded like I was using the violin to ward off spirits. Ms. Lane offered kind corrections. I nodded like I understood, even though I absolutely did not. My rendition of Twinkle Twinkle was less lullaby and more Labaja suspense film. But here's the thing. Nobody laughed. Because all of us were just as lost. There was comfort in the collective chaos. By the third class, I was still the worst in the room. But something shifted. I stopped prefacing every attempt with sorry. I stopped glancing sideways to see who was better. I started noticing the little victories. One clear, sustained note, a measure that didn't fall apart, playing without wincing at the sound I made. None of us were good yet. But we were there. Trying. Stumbling in the same direction. And in that mutual awkwardness, something like community started to form. Encouragement came in tiny offerings. A grin, a quiet nice one. A half laugh that said, "Yep, been there." Practice became something I looked forward to. Not because I was making dramatic progress, I wasn't, but because it reminded me what learning actually feels like. Humbling, messy, honest. Somewhere along the way, we trade wonder for pride. We pretend we're supposed to know everything by now. But maybe the most alive we ever feel is when we're fumbling through something new. When we're unsteady, incomplete, fully engaged. There's a strange kind of joy in being a beginner. A freedom in not knowing yet. Next question. What if strangers aren't strangers? Just stories waiting to be listened to. Chapter 8. Conversations with Strangers. I used to think small talk was pointless. You know the drill. How's it going? Good you? Good. Silence. Exit left. But after 6 experiments, one thing was becoming very clear. Most of what we call normal life is just habit, unexamined and automatic. And maybe, just maybe, talking to strangers was one of those habits worth messing with. So I wrote in my notebook, Day 1, the barista. Her name was Zoe, bright green hair, galaxy-patterned nails. And the kind of energy that makes you feel like maybe the world isn't doomed after all. I asked how her morning was, and she said, honestly, terrible. But the pastries came out great, so we're breaking even. That led to a 5-minute chat about cinnamon, heartbreak, and how baking is just edible chemistry. I left with a croissant and a reminder, everyone's got something going on beneath the surface. Day 2. The janitor. At the library. I struck up a conversation with a man cleaning the floor near the entrance. His name was Michael. Soft-spoken, mid-60s, wore a ball cap that said service greater than status. I told him I liked his hat. He told me he bought it after retiring from a corporate job where everyone cared more about titles than people. Now I get thanked more in one day here than I did in 20 years there, he said, smiling. We talked for 20 minutes. He loves jazz, woodworking, and the smell of old books. I left thinking, this guy has lived more than most CEOs I've met. Day 3. Man at the bus stop. He was maybe 20. Hoodie up, headphones in. I almost didn't say anything. But I sat down a few feet away and asked what he was listening to. He paused. Looked at me sideways. You wouldn't know it. Try me. It was some underground hip-hop artist with a name I couldn't pronounce. He played me a song through one earbud. It was raw, smart, political. You make music too? I asked. I write stuff. But I don't show anyone. I told him he should. Even bad art is better than no art. He smiled, not big, but enough. And then his bus came. The rest of the week followed suit. A retired nurse at the park who carried dog treats in her purse, just in case. A delivery guy who said he listens to romance novels while driving. A woman who runs a second-hand shop and believes every item is just waiting for the right story. By the end of the week, I realized something wild. People want to talk. We're just all waiting for someone else to go first. The world's full of invisible walls. And curiosity? It's a hammer. Next up, what happens when I unplug from everything and just be here now? Chapter 9. No tech. Just now. I didn't know how addicted I was until I left my phone in a drawer and walked out the door without it. I kept reaching for it to check the time, the weather, my messages, my meaning in life. You know, the usual. It was day 1 of what I called no tech. Just now. 5 days. No phone. No laptop. No internet. No streaming. No GPS.com. Just the world. And me in it, I told Riley, and she immediately panicked. What if something happens to you? Then I'll die analog. Like our ancestors. Send me a pigeon if you're alive by Thursday. By hour 3, I was already twitchy. I kept glancing at empty pockets. I reached for a non-existent screen while waiting in line at the grocery store and caught myself pretending to scroll on the back of a receipt. But by the end of day 1, something strange started to happen. I noticed things. Like the sound my apartment makes when I'm not drowning it in podcasts. Or how long my tea stays hot when I'm not distracted. Or the weird, wonderful way my brain wanders when it's not being tugged in 10 different directions. Day 2. I got lost. I went for a walk in a part of the city I didn't know well. Convinced I could find my way back by intuition. I could not. But instead of panicking, I just let myself be lost. I wandered. I asked for directions. I took wrong turns on purpose. And eventually, I found a small bookstore I'd never seen before. With a cat named Jeffrey and a handwritten sign that said, no Wi-Fi. Pretend it's 1993. Felt like a sign. Literally and metaphorically. By day 3, my journal entries got deeper. My thoughts slowed down, not dumbed down, but clarified. Like water settling in a glass after you stop shaking it. I watched a sunset without trying to photograph it. I ate lunch without watching anything. I listened, really listened, when people spoke. I hadn't realized how often I was halfway somewhere else. Half listening, half watching, half leaving. Day 4 was the hardest. Not because I missed my phone, but because I started feeling things. I usually scroll away. Boredom. Loneliness. That quiet hum of existential dread that comes with stillness. But instead of running from it, I stayed. I let it sit beside me. We made tea, and you know what? It passed. On the final day, I sat on a bench by the river for an hour and just existed. No agenda. No soundtrack. Just wind, water, and me, fully present. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel behind. I didn't feel like I had to be anywhere or post about anything. I just was. Chapter 10. The Gift Experiment. It started with a granola bar. A woman on the train looked exhausted. Not in a bad day way, but in an everything feels heavy kind of way. I didn't know her, but I had an extra granola bar in my bag, so I handed it to her. Long day? I said. She blinked, surprised. Year, she said. We both laughed. She took the granola bar. We didn't say much else. But as she got off at the next stop, she smiled at me, that kind of tired, grateful smile that says, I didn't expect kindness today. It stuck with me. Day 1. Post-it bombing. I stuck 23 colorful post-it notes all around my neighborhood on benches, streetlights, cafe tables. Things like, you are not behind. You are becoming. Today doesn't have to be perfect to be worth living. Drink some water. Text someone weird and wonderful. It felt like a secret mission. A few hours later, I passed by and saw a man reading one. Took a picture of it. He smiled. Gift. Delivered. Day 2. The compliment walk. I went on a 45-minute walk with one goal. Give genuine compliments to strangers. A woman's scarf. A man's laugh. A dog's spectacular eyebrows. Most people lit up. A few were confused. One guy looked like he might cry. No one's ever said they liked my voice, he said. Well, it's got warmth, I told him. Like a campfire. Day 3. A letter I never sent. I wrote a handwritten letter to a former teacher who once told me I had curiosity in my bones. I never thanked him for that. I found his school's address and dropped it in the mail. Even if he never writes back, he'll know. That mattered. The rest of the week, I helped a mom carry her stroller up the stairs. I left a tiny sketch of someone's dog at a cafe table. I offered to listen when a neighbor said, I'm fine, but clearly wasn't. Here's the wild thing. The more I gave, the more alive I felt. It was like generosity unlocked something in me, not in a saintly look how good I am way. Just in a deeply human way. Like, this is what we're wired for. To see each other. To reach out. To remind someone they're not invisible. Turns out, gifts don't need wrapping. Sometimes, the best ones are eye contact. A sincere question, or a moment of your time.